Hey everyone, thank you for watching this video. My name is Daniel, I'm with Rooted Music, and today we're going to talk about the hymn, It Is Well. It Is Well was written by Horatio Spafford in 1873. To give you a little bit of background on Horatio Spafford, he was born in New York and then later moved to Chicago area and met his wife Anne. He was a wealthy businessman and a lawyer, and in 1871 he began investing in real estate in the Chicago area. And if you remember what happened in 1871 in Chicago, there was the Great Chicago Fire, and that destroyed almost all of his real estate. So later on, in the next couple years, he would be spending his time trying to rebuild that real estate, dealing with zoning issues and all the many problems that Chicago would have as they rebuild their city. So Horatio was friends with Dwight L. Moody. And Dwight L. Moody was doing a conference in England in 1873. And Horatio was still dealing with some of the troubles involved in rebuilding his real estate. And so his wife and his 4 daughters, he sent them ahead to go kind of prepare for that conference that Moody was doing. Well, on their way there, you might remember this if you know the story behind the hymn, It Is Well. His wife and his 4 daughters are on the ship, the Ville de Haver, and the ship crashes into another English vessel and sinks. And the tragic event that happened, his 4 daughters were swept away in the shipwreckage, and his wife alone was saved. So his wife Anne, she continues to go to England, finds her way to England, and meets up with Moody. She sends Horatio a telegram and says, "Saved alone, what shall I do?" So I can only imagine what Horatio is going through at this point in time when he hears his 4 daughters have died. And even to add to that tragedy, the entire ship, I think it was almost 230 some people that passed away in that shipwreck. I can't imagine what he must be feeling at that moment in time to receive a telegram like that. So instantly he drops everything he's doing and he gets on a ship and heads to England to comfort his wife. Well, while he's on that ship, about over the place where the other ship had wrecked, the captain comes out of his quarters and says to Horatio, "This is probably the area where your 4 daughters passed away." And Horatio was so deeply moved in that moment that it really inspired him months later to write the song, It Is Well. So anyway, Horatio, he goes to England, meets up with Moody, spends some time with Moody. Moody comforts him and his wife, and from the historical accounts, Moody and Ira Sankey, who was actually the kind of music minister for Moody at a lot of his conferences, they both said it was absolutely incredible how calm and how just really relying on God and how peaceful Horatio and his wife were during that time. So months later, Horatio is spending time with Ira Sankey at his house, and he penned the song, It Is Well. Now, there's a lot of controversy in regards to Horatio Spafford's life in later years. And a lot of that stems from his theology because it actually continued to kind of decline as he got older. But at the time when Horatio wrote this hymn, his theology was spot on. And you can see everywhere in this hymn this accurate theology, everything from soteriology or the doctrines of salvation all the way to eschatology, the doctrines of the end times. And it's all in this hymn. It's a very incredible thing about this hymn. And so Horatio Spafford, as I mentioned before, as he continued to kind of grow, there were some other hardships in his life. And right after he wrote that hymn, the kind of economic downturn happened that really was a struggle for him and his family financially. It was called the Long Depression. If you look that up in history, in years later, it was called the Long Depression. But as he continued to grow, his theology did seem to stray off of true biblical Christianity. And so as we continue to follow Horatio's journey, a couple years later after he wrote the hymn, him and his wife had a son who ended up dying of typhoid fever when he was 4 years old. So there's a lot of death kind of surrounding the story of this hymn. And to finish Horatio's story, him and his wife actually ended up starting a kind of cult-like group, a colony in Israel, where they adopted a son in Israel. And so Horatio ended up dying of malaria many years before his wife. And so his wife outlived him by several years. Now, another interesting part of this story that I don't want to miss, the man who wrote the melody to It Is Well, his name is Philip Bliss. Now, Philip Bliss, the thing I want to highlight about him is how he ended up dying. And it's another tragic event around this melody. So him and his wife were on a train, and the train ended up being derailed and catching on fire. And the entire train was in flames. Now, Philip actually got free from the train and was running away and saw his wife was still trapped. And he went back to go be with his wife and ended up being engulfed in flames with her and burning with her to where there was just complete ashes. No one was even recognizable in that train wreck. And so the terrible tragedies that surround the story of this hymn just really show us that God is faithful, God is good, and that ultimately it's our eternal well-being that makes it to where we can say, it is well with my soul.
Jesus took it all my sins, all my heart away. I'm a believer, cause I saw what he did tonight today. And I've been praising like an angel, but so painful, I'm so glad it came. And he's so able to do what he did to me, make your life the same. Yeah.